Hello, everybody. We are live and together in the same frame.
In a totally different place.
Totally different country.
Wow. I think this is the first. I don't think we've done a live GDD from a different country because the COVIDs. Yeah.
But we are fully vaxxed, we can freely travel now.
To the Canada.
To the Canada. So we are currently at Eleanor's Menagerie. So if you hear or see animals, they're allowed to be here.
Yeah. We have consented to their presence.
And
live.
They are super precious. So
yeah.
We hope you get to see them and not just hear them.
Although Frisk is super excited that I finally got off her seat on the couch. So I don't think she's going to come over here because she's going to be like, I can finally sit on the couch. Thank you.
Which now means that Barkley gets the whole dog pillow to himself. So he is also not moving.
Yeah. No, he's like, I'm down. I'm down for the count.
And just like some of you may be familiar with Noodles, the pug, and their Bones and No Bones Day, Barkley also helps us understand what the day is going to be based on the toys he picks. And today was an Orange Slice Day, which means adventure. So we just want you all to know that today, April 5th,
Orange Slice Day.
Orange Slice Day. Enjoy yourselves. Like we said, welcome to April 5th, everybody.
Hi.
We have a lot to talk about.
Oh, boy.
Because the Academy is the gift that keeps on giving.
We were talking about what we were going to do this week for the topic, and we were like, so news-wise, we've got Ukraine and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences.
Let's go with AMPAS.
We're going to go with the Academy because we're just not going to touch the Ukraine.
Yeah. But first, as always, let's kick it off with empathy exercises. So this first one is for me, where like the day after the Academy Awards, we got the announcement that the White House is hiring a full-time ASL interpreters.
I know. It's so exciting.
I'm so stoked, so jazzed. Also, first time in 2022. But we're going to stop being mad that they took this long and just embrace that they got here at all.
That's the
energy.
That's the energy we're going to have for it.
So we're really excited about that. Also, this link that will be in the downstairs, which is what we're calling the show notes now. Thank you, Sorted Foods. Yes. There's a great interview from CBS Sunday Morning, one of Aaron's very favorite television programs.
They do a fantastic job.
Oh, and evidently I was going to talk about something from the Philadelphia Business Journal that has disappeared. So we're going to move on to...
That's amazing. That link was there like 2 days ago.
2 days ago. It's okay.
Oh,
the internet is sometimes forever and sometimes temporary.
Yeah. Okay. So on to my empathy exercises. We again did that weird thing where like you did all the first couple ones and I did the last ones. So these ones are mine. Speaking of diversity and inclusion and representation, the NFL announced last week, the end of March actually, that they are mandating a minority offensive coach. And expanding the Rooney Rule to include women. So that's very exciting. We do have a couple of women that have made it into assistant coach positions or like defensive coach positions across the league. But the Rooney Rule, for those of you that don't know, was named after Steelers owner Dan Rooney, that mandated that you add minority coaches or that you have minority presences in your leadership in the NFL. But as we've talked about a lot on our empathy exercises and our Good Doctors Diagnose, they're not doing such a super great job with that in terms of representation across the league. So this is the NFL hopefully addressing it. I don't know, but how much can they enforce within the ownership? That's always been the problem. So we'll see where it goes, but I'm excited at the possibility that a coach can be, quote, a female or a member of an ethnic or racial minority. So hopefully this means we see all kinds of humans who love football on the field in the NFL, but I won't hold my breath.
And just for anyone who doesn't know the NFL or football, the reason we're saying offensive coaches, that then offensive coach is the position that then becomes poached for larger roles. It is like considered the stepping stone to head coaching. So if you're like, why offensive coach? Because then that gets them into even higher leadership positions. So strategically, even though, as Aaron greatly points out, how the hell are they enforcing this? Because they don't find people to begin with, but whatever.
I mean, the Rooney Rule's been around for like 20 odd years, maybe 30 years. I don't know. And we have had like 3 Black coaches, head coaches in that time. And that's it.
Yeah.
And certainly more offensive coaches, but we've had a lot of stories of ones that become offensive coaches with the hope to become a starting coach and then get knocked out of the pipeline.
Yeah.
Mysteriously.
So who knows what this is going to happen, but it is a strategic move by the NFL to say, I think even just public eye wise, offensive coach is where we're going. So fingers crossed. And as you know, we will be eagle eye on all of the developments.
Speaking of something else that I am eagle eye on, this one, yes, thank you, New York Times. This shout out goes to our Canadian correspondent, Jay, for sending me this article. That as soon as there we go, we're logged into the New York Times.
Sorry, everybody.
That's all right. That very recently, Pope Francis apologized to the Indigenous people of Canada as a part of the ongoing and very sticky and complicated process of healing and reconciliation for the church's involvement in the institutional abuse of residential schools. Yes. So, this apologies are a good step. There's certainly something that I think is necessary to happen in a public forum to actually promote real healing and reconciliation, but there has to be actions behind that. And like in my head, the example that comes to mind always is Bloody Sunday in Northern Ireland, where British troops were involved in killing innocent civilians. And the whole thing was bungled way back in 1972. And it took until 2008, I think. Was it? It was Tony Blair. So was it 2008 or earlier? I don't know. But anyway, Tony Blair.
We were in Gordon Brown at that point.
Yeah. So anyway, it was Tony Blair, and he apologized and said that it was wrong. So that was a big step. But then what happened after that has not been so great for the victims and survivors of Bloody Sunday. So apologies have to be followed with like actual action and listening to the victims and survivors. So we hope that continues from the Catholic Church's perspective.
Correct.
Listening to the Indigenous peoples of Canada and across the world that have been victims of these systems. So step 1, hopefully, of many.
And if I could go on a brief soapbox about the word reconciliation.
Please do. Step onto my soapbox.
What we're actually looking for is restitution. Because to do reconciliation is to believe that these two parties were conciled to begin with, which the Catholic Church and the Indigenous people never were. They were never conciled. There was always a power differential. So in terms of a power differential, we see this in apartheid. We see this with the civil rights movement in both the United States and in Northern Ireland. We see it in Brazil. We should be seeing it in places like Equatorial Guinea. What we really need to start talking about globally is restitution, not reconciliation. Reconciliation is much more interpersonal than it is between power imbalance communities. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, it made sense to me.
So that's one
I knew the argument you were making.
Yeah. That word reconciliation has started to drive me really nuts.
The bugaboo. Yeah. And a lot of times
because it just miscommunicates what we're actually trying to do. And to me, it becomes like a verbal Band-Aid on a bullet hole.
Yeah. And so like a conflict reconciliation or conflict resolution was often used in places like Northern Ireland and Bosnia and South Africa. Rwanda. And a lot of folks that we know who have done a lot of work in this area really push for the phrase conflict transformation.
Yep.
So I would say like a process of healing and transformation or restitution or both for the Indigenous peoples, because, it is presuming that something can be resolved and it will have an endpoint, or that something can be reconciled. Whereas transformation recognizes that it's an evolution of a relationship that may not have been consensual, that might have had different power dynamics. So welcome to our soapbox for language used around conflicts and abuse. But
you're all welcome.
You're here for a reason. And I think this is finally.
This is final. Yes.
This is finally. exciting news that the Native American tribe, I'm going to have to scroll. Can you scroll for me?
I can. Where did the cursor go?
The Rappahannock tribe, which is a native tribe in Virginia, has reacquired 465 acres of sacred land. So a common phrase and platform within a lot of Indigenous communities is land back, especially sacred land that has been taken often many times without consent from Native and Indigenous peoples, and then turned into other things. Like, the example that I did not know was sacred Indigenous land was the land that has now have Mount Rushmore on it.
Really? I didn't know it was sacred. Okay.
So very important spiritually to the Indigenous people groups of that area, and a part of their history. And we stole it and then carved a bunch of white men into the cliffs. So I'm delighted for the Rappahannock tribe, and hopefully they can have some measure of restitution and healing with this. Obviously, from a pragmatic perspective, we can't give them all their land back, because then, where would we live? Because this is all native land, all of it. But, there are, I think, a lot of ways in which we can rebuild some of these relationships and restitute some of these wrongs and harms caused by, especially if it's public land or like national park land. And there's a lot of these disputes happening in a lot of national parks around the country as well. So we'll keep a weather eye on them as always. But salutations to the Rappahannock tribe in Virginia, and I hope you are happy to have some of your sacred land back.
And where the Rappahannock tribe connects to our main topic is that the sacred land that is talking about in that GDD is where they first encountered John Smith. And these are the people the people group that is greatly deserved by the movie Pocahontas. So stories are important. What? We know that. We've talked about that all the time. I know when I grew up that I absolutely thought that the story of Pocahontas was true, because it was told to me as historic. And so the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences holds a lot more power in our society than we often give it credit for, especially the people that laugh off the Oscars. Mm-hmm. It's just the Oscars. It's really dumb. As we've said it before, you are totally right. They're really dumb. The problem is they determine what other stories get told. And that's very, very important. Last week, in light of the shit show that was this year's ceremony.
It was just
unmitigated
shit show.
Lots of things have happened. If you joined us last week, you know that we tried very hard to go through an intersectional perspective on the event of the slap, which I refuse to give a cheap name to, just because it is so weighty for so many people, and to steal Bernice King's word, tender, which I still really love.
Yes.
But one of the things is that the Academy Awards said that they condone violence in all its forms.
They do not condone.
They do not condone violence, excuse me.
Yeah, I put condone and on our social media, and shout out to Cheryl Westlong for being like, do you mean?
Oh, yeah.
So, yes, the Academy does not condone violence in any form, is the quote that their statement was.
Really, it should say the Academy condones violence in all its forms, because that's what it really does.
Yes.
So their statement is that they don't condone any violence. And the best thing is the tweet that's going around with pictures of people like Roman Polanski,
Harvey Weinstein,
Woody Allen.
Yeah.
Holding trophies aloft in joy at all times.
Yeah. How many Oscars did Harvey Weinstein win? Like
I don't
21 or something?
But he is like largely the reason that Gwyneth Paltrow has hers.
Yeah.
So let's also talk about the system that Harvey built based on intimidation and violence to get how many other people Oscars under the Miramax tag.
Yeah. And we can make lots of distinctions and classifications and categorizations of violence. And certainly what happened between Will Smith and Chris Rock was on a public stage on a live television program. But there was violence of a lot of forms happening within the system of Hollywood and big picture films, big budget films, what Miramax was doing through Harvey Weinstein. It wasn't just the individual abuse that Harvey Weinstein was perpetrating on people, but the culture of abuse, and intimidation and manipulation and threats and all of this. It was a very if we expand this definition of violence to include like any harm against other.
Oh my God, let's talk about Judy Garland, and let's talk about the child film system, and how one of the reasons that Judy famously was so incredibly protective of children on movies after The Wizard of Oz is that she was essentially starved to death on The Wizard of Oz and emotionally and physically abused throughout that process. So miss me with that you do not condone, miss me.
In all forms. When it's a whole system built on, abusing marginalized humans, whether that's, Black folks, Indigenous folks, women, in the representations and the depictions that were happening. And a lot of it was, indicative of cultural perspectives at the time. Sure. But part of this, we're going to stick with restitution, girl, because that's the word of the day. Part of this restitution process and healing process is recognizing the harm you've caused.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so for the Academy to come out and be like, nope, no violence from us, like ever, it's just bullshit.
It shows a shallow understanding of violence. And it's like, you've never physically slapped somebody on our stage. Okay.
Yeah.
But you did allow a lot of really violent stereotypes to be not only portrayed, but awarded.
Yeah.
And then as we brought up last week, there is the issue that Marlon Brando really, towards the end of his life, really copped onto Indigenous rights. And that was one of the things that he sent an Indigenous woman to decline his Oscar for The Godfather in the hopes of making a political statement, in the hopes of sparking a conversation. It did not, spoiler alert. America was not ready for that at all. And let me tell you who really wasn't ready for it. That would be Mr. John Wayne.
Oh, John Wayne. Yeah.
So they had to restrain him from not going up on stage.
And physically assaulting Sachin Littlefeather. Like, okay.
And then we can talk about verbal violence. Because honestly, this culture that we've set up, that part of an award show is roasting. Because we hear it all the time. Let me say, this connects in my brain. So let me make the connection out loud. One of the things you hear that I've heard a lot this week is comedians make their money making fun of people of privilege. And everyone in that room needs to be brought down a peg. And they all need to remember that they're just actors. And, we're all getting our panties in a twist over nothing. Several things. Not everyone in that room is actors. The Hollywood pay scale is completely different for different divisions and different people. I love the Marvel movies with all my heart. Should Robert Downey Jr. have been paid the equivalent of Zimbabwe's GDP? No, he should not have. But that's how much money he made for Disney. Yeah. And so that's how much money he got. That's part of this system. Is it broken? Is it terrible? Absolutely. Does Robert Downey Jr. deserve to be stood up and mocked for his addiction? No. And if that had happened, people would have been outraged. But because we made fun of Will and Jada Smith's open marriage and Amy Schumer made fun of her body, that's okay, because that's all just in the name of comedy. So we also have this really weird system of who's allowed to be made fun of and who isn't allowed to be made fun of.
And for what?
And for what?
What's an acceptable joke and what isn't? And I think you want to make fun of RDJ for how much money he made. Cool. Or
he'll probably be right there with you from the speeches I've seen him make.
Yeah. Or how kooky his house is. Fine.
But please make fun of him for wearing those sunglasses because they're all terrible.
Something personal like his ongoing, addiction, is not as tasteful. And, sometimes people feel offensive. But I think once we get into this parsing of jokes, then we're going down a different rabbit hole altogether. But I think it is all part and parcel of this system that we're talking about.
Yeah, my point is, do we even need people making jokes on the award shows? Which we don't.
And you and I say this every year. We're we don't need hosts. We don't need jokes. We don't need gimmicks. And we are told sometimes by people that they enjoy them.
They love the
you enjoy the show of the part of it. I just want to see the dresses and hear the speeches. I don't want anyone to get cut off for how long they want to talk, so that you can do a stupid skit about Amy Schumer's post-baby weight, which just shouldn't have been a skit anyway. Never mind that if Amy Schumer is comfortable making jokes about her body size, there's a lot of humans in the world who might not want to hear those jokes being made. Similar to all the folks that spoke up about disabilities, various forms of disabilities and illnesses that really hated that joke Chris Rock made. So do we need to continue with this system when it causes harm?
And it's always controversial.
Yeah.
it causes harm. Let's not continue with it. But also, we've been having the is this joke right? Is this joke not right? Since Ricky Gervais, and before Ricky Gervais, since David Letterman, and before David Letterman, since,
you know, all the way back.
Because the other thing that I find very interesting is that no one did anything when Ricky Gervais made these jokes.
Like, people were upset about him.
And so we're also, I think, seeing I'm hoping we're seeing a real analysis of if this is necessary. I don't think that comedy ever has to punch down to be funny. My favorite comedies don't punch down. They don't punch on people with less power, even if it's in the moment. Because, like, yes, Will and Jada Smith have more power than Chris Rock right now, but not in that moment. They didn't have the microphone. Mm-hmm. And so you can also, I think, the other thing that really bothers me about the argument of these people are all Hollywood elites, they all need to be taken down a peg, is that we have completely then lost sight of the fact that these are human people.
Yeah.
With human feelings and human stories and human emotions. And I know somebody who once went to an Academy Award as a civilian. And the way that he tells that story is that they were all like completely, the whole room just felt nervous. And the minute that the cameras went off for commercial breaks, you saw, and this was back in the 90s, so nobody had cell phones, you watched people exhale.
Yeah.
That sounds like a hellscape, and I love attention. So I can't, let's just keep in mind that these people are people, and there's lots of things to make fun of in this world, or because the best comedy is relatable, I think. Yeah. That's what makes me laugh the hardest, rather than destroying people. So not only is the system of Hollywood built on exploitation of lots of folks, the show of the Oscars is built on making fun of lots of folks. Yeah. So you can, again, Academy, that statement's nonsense.
It is. And I think, like, for me, what's important about humanizing everyone, regardless of their privilege, right? That's what we do as empathy educators. And we spent our whole life last week humanizing as much as possible the main people involved in what happened between Will Smith and Chris Rock, and talking about, we don't know what was going on in Will Smith's head, but we know some of his story. We know some of Chris Rock's story. We know, like, they're all human beings. And it was a real quick moment on television that contained so many layers of emotions and trauma and identity. And so that happens in all the interactions at these shows. And anytime somebody is that much of a public figure, and, we're really good at the human interest stories when we want them, but we're also really good at the teardown stories when we want them. But I don't think we need both of them, because anytime we're stopping our ability to empathize with people, anytime we're, like, literally dehumanizing people because of their privilege or their wealth or their assholery, we're limiting our own ability to be an empathetic person and to see humanity in the person we pass while walking our dogs, because we have justified that in our head, in certain circumstances, it's okay to dehumanize people. And so then it makes it so much easier to do it in your everyday relationships, which is really just not cool. And I don't think, for something that garners as much national attention as the Academy Awards does, I don't think we need to be selling that message that in certain circumstances, it's cool to dehumanize people and to make fun of them for their body shape or their ability or their mental health or their marriage or their, whatever, or their shoe size. I don't care. Like, just, we can tell jokes that aren't punching down, and we can, if the Academy sets itself up that it wants to be a place that is setting an example for what inclusivity looks like, and that's what the message they keep telling us, they need to do the work. Like, show me, this is a math problem, like, show me your work.
Yeah.
Where you can't just go from, like, math question to answer. I've got to see this. And lol, is the Academy going to do that? No.
And that's one of the kind of shitty parts of all of this, is that they have such cultural power, and yet they're entirely driven by capitalism. And so until we stop, but the thing is, like, I don't even know what capitalism will help, because none of us see these movies they keep nominating.
I know.
Like, none of these movies make money, and people aren't watching the show anymore. So I don't, because, like, either you have the people like us who are like, to show us the damn awards, or you have the people that want all the shtick, and you can't keep both people happy. And so they keep trying to make both of us happy, and you make none of us happy.
And you have a 3.5-hour show.
And you have a 3.5-hour show that I went to bed for. Like, honestly, come on. And this is my job. I just couldn't do it. So it's pick a lane.
Mm-hmm. And be nicer about it.
Be nicer about it. And a big part of, like, this is just also a movie fan thing. Genre movies are part of Hollywood and can be well enough made to do an Oscar. If you want to nominate Spider-Man, nominate Spider-Man. If like, just don't come up with a fan category to do it. These are still beautiful acts of, I don't know when we decided that the only things that are important in life are things that depict pain, but I'm tired of it. I'm tired of only rewarding movies in which someone suffers.
Yeah, or on some kind of level that it's like an elevated form of the art. If it's a story that speaks to people and is powerful and moving, we started this whole GDD talking about why we tell stories and why humans need stories. So, like, can we just make decisions based off
what is the best storytelling this year?
What is the best storytelling this year? Like, regardless of what genre it's in or format it's in.
I don't care. Like, people really loved The Martian. Yeah, it seemed to bring a lot of joy.
It was delightful.
There we go. It was well done. It was a good movie. It was well put together.
It was well acted.
And I guarantee you people enjoyed it more than they enjoyed the fucking Power of the Dog.
No offense to anybody who enjoyed the Power of the Dog.
But I'm like sure collectively more people, I meant. Like, I meant the amount, not the level.
It's fine.
The joke didn't
land. We both don't care for the Power of the Dog.
I'm just tired of stories of abusive white men and their pain. We've told that story and I'm tired.
Have we?
Hashtag Harvey Weinstein.
Have we told that story?
So like Encanto was one of the best movies of the year. Reward it. Also, let's talk about the joy factory that was In the Heights. Where was that anywhere? The politics of getting these movies awarded.
Art house movies,
all this kind of stuff is also, I think, like, what I would love to do is pull back the curtain in a certain way and let's start calling a spade and say what the Oscars are.
Yeah.
And I think that would help some of this conversation. Like, let's stop pretending they are the arbiter of all that is important culturally, because they are only going to concentrate on this bucket of society.
Yeah.
So let's say this is what it is, and then let's do something. And like, that was one of the things the Globes were great for before we found out exactly how racist they were.
I know, because the Globes would straddle that line a lot better.
It'd be really weird. And God love them. They loved chaos.
But HuffPo doesn't like non-white folks, so that's a problem.
Or they only like non-white folks if they're ingenues, because they did love Jane the Virgin.
Which is true.
They love young.
Yeah, or stories about like Black and brown folks that are acceptable, like 12 Years a Slave.
12 Years a Slave, ways in which white people still triumph.
Yeah. So we had some hope, and like I like the SAG Awards because they're just acting.
Yeah, I want everything. I would love to watch, like, teach me more about sound editing. I don't know anything about it. I didn't even understand really what editing videos were till I met Eleanor. Yeah. So like, teach me, show me how good this is. I don't know the difference between cinematography and director of photography. I don't know. Someone tell me. And that's what this kind of, the nerd part of us would like this. But overall, I think as we kind of bring this conversation to a pause, because I'm sure the Academy will put their foot in it again.
Yeah. Just wait until next time. What Eleanor said to me, she was like, wow, we're getting a lot of mileage off of this year's Oscars. I was like, well, A, yes, a lot of things are happening, and B, nothing else is happening. So
we have all condoned violence. We have all committed violence. We have all been victims of violence. To separate yourself as an organization and say we're never okay with it is doing this really weird fake absolution. Mm. Just say, we have contributed to this in the past and we're going to do better in the future.
We were bad about it. We're going to try to be better.
We're going to try to be better. This has shown a real light on how, like, one of the things I read was that they actually did not have a single protocol in place for if somebody stormed the stage.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Which, like, seems a really strange thing in a post-Grammys Kanye world.
They just stopped inviting Kanye to the Oscars, which I don't disagree with.
Like, which is like a really myopic kind of tunnel vision way to look at it. But I'm like, really? You didn't have a protocol even after, just in case? Like, just write it down.
Yeah, you also had a streaker in the 70s. Like, you still don't have a protocol?
Like, so, I ran a study abroad, like, this location.
I thought this was going to connect to the streaker for a minute. No, and I was like, wow, where are we going?
I had to have like policies about like natural disasters that were never going to happen in Northern Ireland, but I had to have a policy just in case we got a freak tornado.
Oh yeah. Abby has to have earthquake policies. Do you know the last time an earthquake occurred in Philadelphia? that like caused any damage?
Long
I
time
think
ago.
like never.
Long time ago.
We're just not on a tectonic
so like,
plate.
Can we just write it down?
So not part of empathy and part of being better humans and deeper humans is stop with these PR statements.
Yeah.
And also say, hey, we have condoned violence in the past and we're probably going to do it in the future because we're humans and we suck sometimes. But what we're going to do is move forward and try to put positions, policies, people in place where everyone in this building is physically safe. Let's start there. And then once we can establish physical safety, let's start establishing other kinds of spaces at the table, inclusivity, safety, involvement, whatever word resonates the best with you. It's like the same thing at one point, like somebody said, I've never when the football player, what's his name? Deshaun Brown was like, I've never disrespected women. And I was like, I've disrespected women. Like we've all done it. Like, let's just
all or nothing statements.
No, that's not like more people need to read Brene Brown because one of the things that she taught us about vulnerability is just being honest. But we're never going to move forward if we keep doing PR absolution.
Yeah.
And we really need to dig in deeper. And so that's our hope for the Academy. That will never come true, but we're going to keep calling for it because it's that or continue to curl in a ball and cry about everything that's happening, not only in Ukraine, but in Somalia and in Madagascar and in all of the other places in Syria, all of the other places that have refugee crises right now, where humans are having physical violence inflicted upon them. The city of Philadelphia is still in a gun violence crisis. So we'll keep talking about the Academy.
No, don't you worry.
Don't you worry. But we also want to remind people that there are physical violent circumstances happening around the world off your television. And one of the things that we advocate for is figuring out how to hold nonviolent spaces in your person and in your life. And that's part of empathy, because empathy and violence cannot coexist. So how we move forward. Well, that's it from us. We're happy to have popped in on our work retreat. We're at our new corporate retreat location. Yeah. Never paying for a spa again. This one comes with puppies. Like, and where am I going?
Puppies and lattes. You guys.
Really, honestly, it's my love language. So coming up, we don't know what we're talking about next week because no one else has tweeted something terribly offensive yet, but I'm sure they will. And then we will advertise it. In the meantime, we would really, really love it if you would subscribe to our newsletter because we have so much good stuff coming up, including you're going to start seeing next week all over the socials promotion for a new training that actually the entire Academy should go through called Words We Don't Say Anymore. And we're going to be talking about the evolution of language. And just like we don't call legs, we don't call them pins anymore. There are other things we shouldn't do anymore as language evolves and figuring out. And that's going to be on June 1st, and keep your eyes peeled for that. But the best way to find out all of that, including coupon codes and sales and all of it, is our newsletter, which Eleanor will link in the downstairs of this video.
Hey, downstairs. Thanks, Sorted Food.
So excited. And if you, as always, if you've got requests for what you want us to talk about, we love requests. It helps us not feel so stressed to come up with content.
Yeah, please don't let us get until Friday afternoon and like
stare at each other
and try and think of something to talk about. Because it'll be the Oscars again, and y'all are tired of it, and we're tired of it.
Yeah,
we're running out.
We're running out. So figure it out. We'll remind you as well that in a couple weeks coming up is going to be Dr. Nadine Thornhill joining us again to talk about Turning Red. And then after we talk about Turning Red, we will get something on the calendar to talk about Raya, the Last Dragon, and also Luca. We're just going to keep doing a Pixar series with her throughout the rest of the year.
That's right.
And we've other things coming up. Don't miss our Bridgerton coverage, our Dropout coverage, all of that, all over Colonizers World Tour.
Like,
we're still in Brazil as you guys are listening to this.
We just started Brazil.
Oh gosh, it's only April. We just started Brazil. We've got lots of Brazil content for you coming up, including some really interesting a documentary that we enjoyed on different levels, which does not happen all that often. So you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
In the meantime, our hope for you is that you do have a nonviolent existence, that you cease from committing violence against yourself, that you cease from committing violence against other people, that you can lean into emotional, physical, social, economic safety for yourself and everybody you love and everyone whose lives you touch. We believe in you, and we are so glad that you have joined us. Again, we never take for granted the time that you spend with us. We'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.